Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm here with a special pre-draft episode. This is, I think, the third year in a row we've been doing this, Luke. I'm here with Luke Braun of the Locked On Vikings podcast. He also has a Patreon, patreon.com/Luke Braun NFL, and you can follow him on Blue Sky at Luke Braun NFL. So pretty easy there, all consistent in a line. Luke, how you doing?
Doing good. I overslept. I took a nap and was late to this recording. So we're doing great. My eyes are a lovely shade of red.
Look,
let's do this.
You grind so much tape, it's unavoidable, right?
You know what it was? I watched too many DBs today, and it made me sleepy.
They're just all sleepy.
I'm so trenched out, man. I'm so trenches nowadays that having to watch a corners and safeties for this draft is killing me.
Oh, dude, watching safeties is terrible. Like watching college safeties is awful because, like, especially like
2/3 of the plays don't matter to you. Like it's the plays the other way, and they hit their landmark, and it's like I learned nothing. Like
I'm saying this offense because I know you hate it, but like watching safeties against the Tennessee offense has to be like literal torture because nothing happens.
Oh my,
right? The whole game.
Yeah, it might matter because sometimes you want to see like, okay, like we've got a Flores defense. You want to see how they like respond to a bubble screen or whatever. Yeah. But for the most part, I try to look at like, okay, what are the more like downfield offenses that are really going to like test a safety rather than just watching them like backpedal 3 steps and then jog toward a tackle every play.
And honestly, guys show you who they are against bubble screens at like 5 plays anyway. So it doesn't really matter all that much.
Right. It's like show me one and I'm good.
Yeah. Like take on a block with physicality and also tackle with physicality. And that's all I need to see. But
yeah. And like it's a differentiating factor with some of these safeties. We'll get to it, I guess. But like the way they like put a foot in the ground and like trigger downhill is like very different. So it is something, but like my God, it is boring.
Yeah. So great. We're running off the rails already. I'm gonna keep you here for like an hour and a half. It's gonna be a fantastic time. But the first topic I kind of wanted to get into just to set the stage for what we have at the Vikings draft. And I think it's kind of critical because the lens through which I see the draft, right, is people talk about best player available, but it's not really realistic for you to draft, I don't know, a quarterback at 24 for the Vikings. If there were a quarterback that were the best player available, or, you know, the Vikings kind of have other needs, right? But like tight end is another example where I couldn't see the Vikings drafting a tight end at 24, honestly, depending on who fell.
Right.
But, you know, so we want to rank the needs with the understanding that any of the needs are probably realistic at 24 in terms of the top 5 that the Vikings have. So how do you kind of order it, do you think?
Boy, there's 3 that I just think are, take whatever. They're just, they are needs. I don't know if any of them are any more prioritized than the others, but they're corner, safety, and D tackle. Corner, obviously, lots of 1-year deals still. Safety, you've got a clear, like, looming issue in what are you going to do when Harrison Smith is done? And then defensive tackle, even though they got some short-term answers and Jonathan Allen and Jalen Hargrave, they're older. They're short-term. Right. I love their prospects right now. In 2 years, you're probably going to want to have somebody young waiting in the wings. So I see them very much like they didn't solve that as a draft need. They just made it so that if you don't pick D tackle, you're not going to have like a problem about it right now, which is kind of what you want out of free agency. After that, it's kind of anything. If you're not going to take one of those 3 positions, take a guard, I guess, would be 4th. Guard and center would be 4th and 5th for me, I guess. Actually, center probably more than guard.
It's kind of interesting for me as well because I would have put interior offensive line up there with the top 3 needs, and I would drop safety down a little bit. And maybe it's because of not even how I value the positions, but just and probably the draft prospects available are influencing this for me a little bit, to be completely honest with you. But I think the team really likes Theo Jackson. And maybe that's not something for me to personally rely on, right? But like, I just can't see them diving that deep into the safety pool, even though it's like every single mock draft has them as a safety. And I also don't think Blake Brandel competing with Michael Juergens for a job is a serious answer at left guard. Ultimately, like
I'm trying to read the way the Vikings are.
Yeah,
I think they feel like Blake Brandel, like they feel like Blake Brandel is more serious than we might feel like he is. And I still think he's okay. Like, I don't see him as like this emergency thing that needs to be replaced. Theo Jackson, I don't feel that way about yet. But talk to me in October. My mind could be completely changed about this. It's just too unknown. And Blake Brandel has at least shown like some level of, okay, he can play NFL football and not be totally embarrassing.
Yeah, no, and I see that angle of it. I guess I think we've had 1 year of the Blake Brandel experience, and I kind of see Theo Jackson as the anointed safety, the way Blake Brandel was the anointed left guard last year, right? And they never brought in competition for him. And maybe I'm reading too much into the Michael Juergens mention by Kevin O'Connell at, was it the owners meeting that he said that, or wherever it was? But it's like,
and then there's been reporting that they're moving Walter Rouse as well. So it's like they feel like they've got someone in that room somewhere, and not necessarily like they need to add to it. But that's just my read.
Yeah. So it's weird because I'm kind of reading that as the opposite, is they don't feel solid about the player that they have the starter there, and if they found an opportunity to grab somebody they preferred, I think they might do it. But I also would agree with you that center is a more immediate need just because of Ryan Kelly's age. And the fact that he's on a 2-year deal, right? So like, I don't think you could go wrong.
And if they're moving Juergens, who is supposed to be the backup center,
right?
Like they need a backup center,
right? I don't think you could go wrong with any of those top 4. And then I had running back as the 5th, just because I want another long-term answer at running back as well. But really, you could say, oh, I want depth at any of the positions, right? So it's any of the positions,
like even like tight end. Hey, Josh Oliver, if you want tight end too, it's a little much for me. Like some of these positions, tight end, wide receiver, edge, offensive tackle, that are like, look, man, if the dude of dudes is sitting there in your lap, just take him and figure out the redundancy later. That's kind of the BPA like mindset. But there just isn't the dude of dudes in this draft. You're just not going to have that guy. So you kind of do have the ability to just like prioritize a position. I promise you're not passing up on, the next Brian Branch, just because you're taking some other position of need. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's why Brian Branch fell, because like nobody needed a safety that year, and then he fell in a landslide.
And people are weird about values for safeties too. Like teams are kind of weird about it. I mean, Cooper DeJean fell to the second round last year, right? Like that was nonsense too. I didn't get that at all.
Yeah.
But so that's a decent segue at least into what my first main topic, right? Which is I want to go. Let's do 5 through 1 of your top 5 picks for the Vikings, and I excluded some players here. I'm not going to read the whole list, but basically it's everybody you expect to go into the top 10, right? And I also had Will Johnson and Jahdae Barron on there as like the position relevant players. So like I kept Kenneth Grant on the board. I kept, Derrick Harmon, a lot of the defensive tackles on the boards. All the other corners are on the board besides those two, and obviously Travis Hunter. But, just to set the stage for the listeners, all the interior offensive linemen are on the board. So it's basically your pick of the litter, with a couple exceptions.
Yeah. So assuming, that nobody insane has fallen, which is essentially what this list is people who it would be insane to find at 24.
Yeah, exactly.
Kenneth Grant would be top of my list. And then,
and then it goes to trade back really fast, huh?
Yeah, I'm saying like Tyler Booker is probably next. I'm a huge fan of Tyler Booker. I love the way he plays. We can talk about him in more detail if you want. I think Donovan Jackson is like a pretty popular idea at 24 if you do want to go guard. I haven't watched him as closely as I wish I did, so I'll kind of put that one in parentheses. I actually like Shavon Revel at 24. Maybe a hot take. And you probably don't need to take him at 24. You probably can still get him if you trade back, just the way the boards are. And Maxwell Hairston is probably next for me. But honestly, anybody but Grant that I mentioned there, I would not be shocked to see sitting there still on the board after day one closes. So it's kind of, if Kenneth Grant is there, which I don't think he will be. I think he's a 49er. And then it's just like, wow, then you're just kind of forced to reach on a guy.
Yeah, and Kenneth Grant's a really interesting one, right? Because I don't think he's going to be for everybody just because he gets cast as a pure nose. And I want to talk about your evaluation of him a little bit, but I don't think you see him as that pure nose tackle. And I think people cast him that because he's 330 pounds or whatever he is, right? So it's like, okay, this is a guy as a pure nose. He was next to a 3 technique who we expect to go at the top of the draft in Mason Graham, right? Who I did exclude you from choosing for obvious reasons because he's going to go in the top 10. Yeah. But why don't you go ahead and give your evaluation of him and why you think you value him so highly in that case?
Hot take. I actually have Grant above Mason Graham anyways.
There you go.
That ain't no problem. And the reason for that is all aroundness. Mason Graham is a little bit more pass rush focused to me than run game focused. I saw him get washed out by doubles one too many times.
Sure.
And I think if it weren't for consensus kind of trying to like coaxing me to put him higher, I actually would have maybe put Mason Graham below some names that would make people really mad. I've got some hot D tackle takes, but Kenneth Grant is number 1 for me. And part of the reason is, look, when he's playing at 340, or even some people would estimate like 350, right? What do you expect? Well, you expect a guy that's too slow to rush the passer. Nope, not too slow to rush the passer. If you didn't know how big he was, you would have been like, that guy must weigh 300 pounds even the way he moves.
Yeah.
The lateral step is excellent. The knockback with his arms is excellent. The pass rush technique is excellent. It is just an absolute full total package kind of guy that is just going to wreck a whole bunch of face all game long. I made a whole Patreon video about him. Patreon.com/LukeBraun. You can kind of see how excited I got about him, but it's just, the guy is impossible. That was the word that kept coming into my mind. He is impossible in how strong and fast you're allowed to be. Like,
sure.
It's like an inverse correlation most of the time, right? The faster you get, the smaller you get, and the less strong you get. But this guy just feels like he exists somewhere on an axis that isn't allowed. And it rules. He's really cool. He's really good. I love the guy. I don't hate Mason Graham by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just like really, really high on Kenneth Grant, and would be pretty surprised to see him available at 24.
So when I hear that combination of thoughts, right, the player, I think the NFL player that I think the ceiling for this is, right, is Dexter Lawrence, who's one of the best defenders in the NFL. So I don't want to put that on him, but you think he has that kind of potential just based on his physical traits and what he showed in college, really.
To be that nose tackle that you have to game plan for. Because how many teams have a nose tackle that become the focal point of a game plan? Like, you play the Steelers, no, you're game planning for TJ Watt. You play the Lions, you're game planning for Aiden Hutchinson. You play the Vikings, you're game planning for, it's probably still a little bit Harrison Smith, but it should be Jonathan Grenard. And I think some teams actually made a pretty bad mistake not game planning for Jonathan Grenard last year. But it's never the nose. But if you're playing the Giants,
it absolutely is.
It's kind of the nose. Or it's Jeffrey Simmons, right? This guy, can be that sort of, oh my God, I have to game plan for him, change the texture of your defense kind of dude. And I think he is ready to play, to contribute to you right out the box. Of course, he'll be a rookie. Everybody has to take their lumps as a rookie. But the way he played against true NFL talent elsewhere in the Big Ten is really comforting in that sense. And so barring, your classic, this reason, that reason why a rookie wouldn't make it in the NFL, there's obviously that sort of caveat you have to put on it, but you have to put that on everybody. As much as I can love a draft prospect and feel confident that a draft prospect's going to have success at the next level, I feel that with him.
So on the maybe negative side of Kenneth Grant, right? Or like, at least in terms of NFL expectations, right? I think a lot of what we can talk about from the ceiling expectations, or what Dexter Lawrence is, people thought Jordan Davis for the Eagles could be, right? In terms of an absolute athletic freak, extremely explosive at a large size. One of the downfalls for Jordan Davis, or at least one of the negatives for Jordan Davis coming out that I think also applies to Kenneth Grant, although I'd be interested to see your take and what you were able to see on this, is that Jordan Davis didn't play a ton of snaps at Georgia, right? And he's been effective, but I think he's been primarily a rotational player with the Eagles, where he's playing like 400 snaps a year, right? So was Michigan comfortable putting Kenneth Grant in like third down pass rush situations, or did they kind of take him off the field and prefer smaller guys at that? Or are the cuts you watching like, is it very clear, or it's maybe not something you might have noted? Either way,
you're getting me.
I realize it's a very specific question, right?
They cut out the plays that he's not on the field for, so I don't know. Off the top of my head,
totally fair.
Yeah, so you got me. I'll put it this way: he's a great pass rusher for his size,
sure,
for the body that he is, but you can only be as excited about it as I am once you've adjusted for that. Once you're experiencing him as the full package of player that he is, the full disruption guy, run defender that he is, and then going, oh my God, and I get a little pass rush too. But if you want like true pass rush juice, that's going to be Mason Graham, and that's going to be why Mason Graham goes higher than Kenneth Grant. I just feel like those guys on the interior tend to disappoint a little bit more, which is why it's different for me on my board. But like, yeah, as a pass rusher, there's going to be a lot of contain. There's going to be a lot of eat a double. There's going to be a lot of, bull rush, push the pocket, and don't do anything else. And somebody else is going to have to be the one making the play ultimately. Here's something wild though that I'm just remembering now. My dude drops into coverage sometimes.
Yeah, that rules. That rules.
Holy crap. As a 340-pound man in a hook zone. What? That's insane.
And Brian Flores is going to do it. He's going to put that 340-pound man in a hook zone. So, essentially,
he did pretty good. I think he got an interception once.
That's crazy. I got to be honest.
Almost did or something.
I was watching like all the Vikings free agents because I'd been procrastinating on it like over this past weekend. And like Jonathan Allen had a pretty nice zone drop in the one game. And I was like, wow, he mirrored the QB's eyes. And it was like, all right, I'll take it. But no, speaking of the Vikings defensive tackles, right? I think for me, there are like three distinct roles that they want to play with these guys, right? It's the Harrison Phillips rundown plugger, right? It's the Jonathan Allen who was Jonathan Bullard and probably a more expanded role than we saw from Jonathan Bullard as a primarily rundown player who offers a little bit more pass rush juice than a Harrison Phillips does, right? And Harrison Phillips is your nose. And then I see Javon Hargrave as primarily playing what Jihad Ward did last year, right? Where Ward was purely
like out on the edge sometimes?
No, Ward was never out on the edge. He was almost exclusively an interior pass rusher for the Vikings. If you look at the snap distribution, yeah, he was a pure third down pass rusher. And then in the like Lions game and in the playoff game, the second Lions game and the playoff game, we played him in like the Jerry Tillery role. So if you look at the snaps,
I guess I never noticed the Dean Lowry Memorial role.
Yeah, the Dean Lowry Memorial role. So that's kind of where I see Javon Hargrave.
The third D tackle that comes off whenever the nickel has to come out. That's Hargrave to me because he feels like very DPR to me, like very designated pass rush.
So your profiling of Kenneth Grant just sounds like we're upgrading on Harrison Phillips, right? And Harrison Phillips is under contract.
I feel like that's the Jonathan Allen successor, maybe.
Or the Jonathan Allen successor. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. If you want the Harrison Phillips successor, CJ West is a guy that I am huge draft crush on. Almost put him in the first round. Almost put him in my top 5. Like, I have irresponsible takes about CJ West.
I did listen to Locked On Vikings this morning every day, so I did know that about CJ West. But
no pass rush, you'll never get it. He'll be like not entirely useless.
Okay,
but mostly you're just gonna kind of hope he takes some space. But absolute zero tech run defender, that's the guy.
I'm definitely interested in that a little bit because do you know who the number one comparison for CJ West on RAS is? And it's a top 5 comparison on Mock Draftable too.
Oh, really? Linval?
No. Javon Hargrave. Because of the size.
Well, there you go.
Right? Because he's an undersized,
like measurables,
not long, but like stout interior defender, and they ran similar 40s and have similar like jumps or something. I don't know. CJ West, I don't think did quite all the athletic testing, but anyway, yeah, it's kind of see, that was kind of what I was thinking with the CJ West stuff. But if he's more of a rundown plugger who gives you some pass rush use, that kind of sounds like Poona Ford to me, right? Poona Ford who's a 6'0" player who played really well for the Chargers last year. So definitely an interesting one
from a distance. Pined whenever he hits free agency. Yeah,
exactly. And then we'll keep it rolling with the defensive tackles here, right? And then we'll kind of get into your Tyler Booker and some offensive linemen, and then we'll get into the corners, and then we'll try to do safeties as well, even though you didn't mention any of them, because I agree with you that neither home would be on my top 5 list.
Yeah, I do not have a single first-round safety in this whole class.
Yeah, but why don't we get on to Derrick Harmon, who I know you just also recently did an episode for, and I think really the argument I would make for him is you see a lot more pass rush juice for him, and I just think the value that provides you, even if there are some like technical deficiencies, make it worth it at 24 for me personally.
Yeah. So I would not be excited for him at 24. I would be much more into it after a trade down, and I'm not talking about a huge one. So we're not going to be super far apart here. But you know, pick him in a draft pick that starts with 30 something, like I'm fine. But just kind of sticking and picking it with him as though he's, you know, this going to be this bona fide starter for you for all the way through and maybe beyond a rookie contract. I don't see it. And the reason I don't see it is I see a bit of a one-trick pony, and I'm really worried about that. Which might sound really crazy to like if you're familiar with like the surface level analysis of Derrick Harmon, where like, wait, but didn't he like line up on the edge sometimes? Isn't he like, you know, a penetrator in both run and pass? Like, what's the deal? Well, he's kind of got 2 moves, and one of them I don't think really translates to the next level. The move I think does translate is he's got a great slash step, that lateral step you take. You want to get all the way out and then up. That out step, really great stuff. He can turn. He has the flexibility in his hips, which is a level of athleticism that never shows up at the combine. There's no test for this one. But he has the flexibility in his hips to get them turned perpendicular to the line of scrimmage, to get that lateral motion, to get that lateral distance, and then flip them back and restack them back square. Really good at that. And it gets him through a lot. I think some of the penetration plays, the highlights that he really made his name on, I hate to say it, but sometimes my guy just got lucky. The running back would screw up. They'd bust a protection. He'd get into the backfield enough where like it makes me wary of the stat. He's got great like penetration, pressure, you know, disruption stats. And I think a lot of them were a little bit more him getting lucky with an idiot college O-line in front of him rather than him like truly defeating a guy. If he wants to defeat a guy, he almost always goes to swim move. And I don't think that the swim move makes it at the next level. It's just too beatable of a thing. Everybody knows how to punch your ribs when your arm goes up. And he's either going to have to really, really, really get good at it or find a new like fastball in his pass rush to become the guy in the NFL that he was in college, just to sustain the guy in that he was in college. There's more assembly required there than meets the eye, but that's very much my opinion of the guy. He's the kind of athlete that's worth that sort of thing, but this is not a guy that like steps on the field right away and starts challenging guys like Javon Hargrave for jobs.
Yeah, so I'm kind of interested, right? Because he would be a player where I don't think you're going to ask a first-round defensive tackle to be a full-time starter, and that's going to get a lot of people upset at the Vikings, right? Just like they did for Dallas Turner, because at the end of the day, like people want to see production from rookies. Is what the reality is. They're going to look at snaps.
Have been a thing.
Yeah.
But
I think it could be good to get somebody who's a little bit underdeveloped technically into the Vikings ecosystem, because I think like, and I don't know how you felt about Jonathan Allen coming in, but like, I think he's a very developed hand fighter. Just in terms of like,
even coming out, I didn't have a draft opinion back then.
I mean, no, like right now, obviously,
when it first came out that he was interested in the Vikings, I was like, ooh, like,
yeah,
I love him.
Right. So it's like having a guy like that in the room for a player like, you know, Derrick Harmon, I think could be really, really valuable to get him to win beyond that initial first step, right? Because like Javon Hargrave to me is a guy who just bull rushes through people and he doesn't have secondary moves really. Like he's still winning on his athleticism at 32 years old to me. But Jonathan Allen has that secondary move kind of stuff, and he's not nearly as quick as Hargrave is. So I think, you know, as somebody who you want as a ball of clay who has great pass rush juice, I think that's where the value comes in with Harmon. if that kind of makes sense. And he's stout against the run too. Like, it's not like he's a run deficient player, right? Generally.
No, I think he takes on doubles well, which is huge.
And he was like apparently 340. So I guess he transferred from Michigan State to Oregon, and he was a bigger nose at Michigan State. So it's like, I can see where that lineage comes from. And I think that's a lot better than being a guy who's like in the 280s or something, trying to bulk up and start to learn how to play the run, right? Like, I'd rather learn a guy be explosive and learn how to pass rush than be explosive and learn how to play the run, you know?
Right. Yeah. And that it speaks to a thing for me too, that like, so I'm not going to be familiar at all with what he did at Michigan State, because I focus really, really heavily on the final.
Oh yeah.
These kids change so much from year to year, but the guy you were recently is much closer to the guy that we're actually going to see in the NFL. Especially like when you start watching guys, they're freshmen, their sophomore year, and they're just screwing up every other play. It's like, I don't need to see this.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Figure out. How about I just see what product you actually are coming out as?
No, I totally agree with that. And at the end of the day, it'll be interesting to see, kind of how it progresses for him as he becomes an NFL player, because I think it's important to realize that, and I get into this maybe a little bit too deep in terms of prospect age, but like, the younger a guy is, and Harmon's going to be in 22, this upcoming season. So he's not the youngest player in the draft, but he's not going to be all that old. I think it should be easier for them to learn new stuff. But I do want to flip it over to the final defensive tackle, who maybe some people are screaming that we haven't talked about yet, right? Because he's another player who's like solidly mocked within the first round, but that's Walter Nolen. So do you have any quick thoughts on Walter Nolen? I don't want to take like 5 minutes on him, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm not a huge Walter Nolen guy. I saw what Georgia did. Okay.
I'm not either, for the record.
For what that is, so these Georgia O linemen, by the way, if you want an interior lineman, get somebody who wore a G. Oh my God. Yeah. I don't care which one, get any of them. But, and actually drafting Jared Wilson is maybe my favorite idea for them at 97, if he's there. But what like Dylan Fairchild and Tate Ratledge and Jarrett Wilson did to Walter Nolen was just violence, man. They washed him out so hard. They got him, even with high-ish hands, they got him on the shoulder pads. They smoked him. He, to me, is a pure enough designated pass rusher at the next level. I do not see him holding up against the run at the next level, and I would be genuinely very concerned about how often I can afford to put him on the field. He might have to have a sort of third down rotational role to me, at least to start, until we can get him a little more sand in his pants, because that man cannot hold up to an NFL-sized double right now.
Yeah, and I think for the Vikings, that might be more important than for like a different team, honestly, just because of how run focused the Vikings play on early downs, or honestly how late the Vikings play in the back end at all times, right? Like, we really rely on early downs on that 3 down front to defend the run, because it's like Josh Metellus in the box, right? And like, not that Josh Metellus isn't a great run defender for a guy who's listed as a safety, but he's still a safety in the box on a run focused down, right? So I think
it's a big problem, and we take it for granted because I think there's a lot of D tackles in the league that can take on a double just fine and do the basics. To the point where when we see a guy that can't do that basic, we go, well, yeah, but whatever. But look at his pass productivity. I'm sorry, that guy's not going to be on the field if you don't trust him to take on a double, and I don't trust him to take on a double.
Yeah. So I agree. I would be out on Nolen at 24 for the Vikings.
I have him like pretty deep in the 40s or in the 30s, maybe the 40s.
I think people are heavily overrating the flashes on it, right? And I think it's not a consistent down to down player.
Big time.
So even like as a rusher. So I don't know. To me, or to you, the next player on your board would be Tyler Booker, right? And as you said, that's the point where you just want to trade down. You don't get overly excited about it. But tell us what you think is great about Tyler Booker, and then I have a couple questions for you on him.
Yeah, I could be talked into Tyler Booker at 24. This is like right at the edge of guys that I actually feel good about sticking and picking at, and everybody else I said, I'm like, him and Revel, I'm like, maybe, right? Booker, total mauler, beautifully strong, absolutely adore him in pass production. I think, or pass protection. His technique wise, just really polished, super teach tapey, very textbook, exactly what you want to see. The way that he sets up his feet, the way that he's patient with his hands, but not too patient. Everything is really nice and polished. The ding on him that's going to make him fall maybe even out of the first round entirely is that Bama just ran like no zone. They did all power, lots of pullers, Jalen Milroe stuff. And so you just don't have a great sense for like bucket steps. And I mean, you give him bucket step for like when he pulls. So I think you can, but like climbing, comboing the second level, all that stuff, you don't get a great sense for it. And then he had like a bad combine for those kinds of things. So now he's getting this reputation as this like kind of slow tank. I don't see it. I don't see slowness on tape. But that's a very like visual vibes judgment, which is going to be nebulous, but I'm like not worried about it personally. So I still think it's fine. He'll scheme fit just fine. That's just not what Bama did because of Jalen Milroe, not because Tyler Booker like can't run.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of interesting, right? Because I would say traditionally, even if he is he's acceptable as sort of that level athlete, right? Which when you have as poor athletic testing as you did, I think you get to acceptable. I learned from Pat Elflein that you can't just completely ignore bad athletic testing if a guy looks good on tape in college. But the problem with Pat Elflein is he was also small, right? Like the reason Tyler Booker has bad athletic testing is because he's a massive human being, right? Like it kind of goes hand in hand there. So I guess the interesting kind of
he's a big tank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the question that I come up with then is if the Vikings were interested in Tyler Booker, do you think that would definitively signal that like they want to be a much more duo team? Because like you saw a lot more gap from what Ryan Kelly did and what Will Fries did in Indianapolis than what we currently run. And how realistic do you think it is that they will try to switch to that sort of running style, I guess?
Forget duo. I'm thinking power.
Yeah.
So let's double team that 3-tech and let's get a puller going. Which, I mean, when Booker was asked to pull, which is, I think, the most movement skillsy thing you got to do, it still absolutely worked fine for me. He had the footwork for it and he could get out there. So yeah, it just didn't concern me enough, but yeah, I think that absolutely could be a theory if the Vikings are more on your side of it than mine, and then they're going, yeah, we're going to do that. I mean, that works great for Darrisaw, right? If he's going to down block all day long.
Yeah.
But I think that they're going to stick with mid zone still because of Darrisaw. That is just such a good play for him, and it's a play that really asks the most of your best player. It just fits so well with that. And you know, double teams on the inside are going to happen whether you're running duo or zone or power or counter, like whatever. You're going to have some double teams.
The Colts were one of the like gap heaviest teams in the league, and they still ran zone like over 50% of the time. Like,
yeah, everybody still does it some, but more gap, more diversity would be, I would hope so. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
That would make you more like what made like the Lions and Ben Johnson successful.
So,
and less like what made your 2022 run game so bad.
One final question on Booker is like, can he hit second level targets like on screens and stuff where he's trying to get downfield and get smaller guys in his frame? Does he execute those blocks? Because that would be the major concern I would have in terms of movement skills is if he's not able to do that.
Yes,
okay.
He can. And watching him do that, I absolutely had no inclination that he was going to like run a crappy 3-cone.
Okay, then that like solves the problem for me. If you're doing it against fast SEC defenders on tape, like I don't think it's all that different from doing it at the NFL level. Not that, you know, these guys aren't the majority of them going to become used car salesmen or whatever, but like at the same time, like these guys have clear athleticism. So he's not doing it at NDSU, which is the other offensive lineman I want to talk about.
Oh boy.
In terms of Zabel. So I found it kind of interesting, right? Because I listened to your pod on Zabel, and I think what I came away with thinking initially kind of felt a little off compared to how you valued him to me, because I think in general, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, you really like the movement skills. You thought from a tools perspective he was good, and he was somebody who was a guard at the next level rather than being a tackle, right? And thought he could make the transition, thought he had the tools to make the transition to guard, right? There wasn't something where he needed to be a tackle because he had the Mike Remmers problem, right?
Right. More that his technique at tackle is so primitive and needs to be reconstructed so much that like the cost of moving him to guard, where you would also have to reconstruct all those same techniques, is negligible. You're rebuilding it anyways. Put him where you think his size fits.
Okay. And that's kind of where I want to get into is, you know, obviously from a value perspective, you don't think the athletic traits or his positive abilities make it worth spending the first round pick to have to teach him all of those techniques. I guess my curiosity is, what's the timeline on learning those techniques? Because like we have seen guys move from the outside to inside and be successful immediately. The Bucs center did it last year, right? I think the Zach Frazier, the center for the Steelers, also did it last year, where they were tackles in college, right? Immediately were able to move inside. And I know I don't even remember one guy's name, so it's Graham Barton was the other guy's name. But like, you know, there have been guys that have been able to do it. I guess you just think he's so far behind that he's not going to be able to.
Yeah, and like if he ends up being a Viking, you know, my initial reaction would be like, okay, that's one I'm going to have to be pretty patient with.
Sure.
But that's okay because, you know, you're drafting athletic traits. You know, if think of the vibes of drafting Danielle Hunter, but at guard, where do you value that? You know,
okay.
I don't think you do that as a first rounder.
Well, if you have Danielle Hunter in this year's draft, his name is Shamar Stewart. So, not saying that he's going to become that, but just saying, like from a traits perspective.
Yeah, well, people are a little more on to him. I think he's going like top 15.
Right, exactly. That's what it's turned into. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, right. But, you know, that idea, right? The raw but athletic third rounder kind of thing is like where I feel it. I have him a little higher than that, but still, it's you asked the timeline, and while there are a couple of notable exceptions that you mentioned, by and large, interior linemen take a minute. Even Ezra Cleveland, right? He moves in from tackle to guard, and that turned out to be the right thing for him. And he ended up blossoming into a totally reasonable guard. But that first year was really rough. So I think if you do get play out of Gray Zabel at guard right away, you're looking at something like that. And Ezra Cleveland was much more polished than Zabel. But Ezra Cleveland had tackle habits you had to break. And so what's nice is I don't think you have necessarily habits you have to break. You just nuke everything and you build everything brand new from the ground up. And that can honestly low-key be a bit of a faster timeline, but it's a lot less acceptable to put in right away. So maybe he will be ready before the end of his first year, but oh my God, do not put him in week one. Where like if Ezra Cleveland had to have played week one at guard, it might have been all right. It might have been, you know, bad, but not embarrassing. I think the way that Zabel, especially like the thing about him, he does not do like a kick slide very well at all to me. It's a back pedal. His hips aren't really with him. His weight is on his heels. It's begging for disaster kind of all the time, just the way he sets up at guard. That's way less of a problem. And you're just going to learn different pass sets anyways. So you're going to kind of naturally remove that stuff. And I know that teams want to put him at center because apparently he's really smart. He can snap. That's also totally fine by me. Yeah, sure. Do that.
Yeah, and like if it's a situation where we talked about Blake Brandel a little bit, like I don't mind starting Blake Brandel for 8 weeks or whenever until the bye is, if somebody like this is added and then he's made enough progress. But it's scary, and it gets back into the early conversation we had where people start going like, where is the production for our first round pick after 3 weeks when they have played limited snaps? You know what I mean? Like that drumbeat, especially on offensive line, which is kind of a position I think you expect to have impact right away, and interior offensive line, right? I don't think people accept a lot of baking time for somebody you're drafting that early at guard, right? Because like the value proposition to draft a guard high isn't good, right? So people are like, if I'm drafting this guy high, he needs to contribute immediately.
Well, excuse me.
No, go ahead. But yeah, so we kind of talked about the only two realistic interior offensive linemen in the first round, right? Is there anyone else you want to mention on the offensive line who might be a first round guy?
I should mention Donovan Jackson, but I can't speak very in depth about him. But what I was going to say about Gray Zabel before I had to sneeze there,
sure.
And then didn't. So that's what I'm going through right now. Let's envision a scenario where the Vikings draft Gray Zabel and they move him to center, and Ryan Kelly plays 2 years, leaves, and then Gray Zabel takes over at center year 3. If he was drafted at pick 24, there is so much anxiety about that people are like freaking out.
Yep.
If you trade down and take him at pick 50, we're vibing. We're, oh, cool. And then Gray Zabel will take over and Ryan Kelly's the guy, and like we're chilling.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thought process that makes me value him where I value him. I think that Zabel just waits in the wings while either Blake Brandel gets his, chance of chances, and then if he doesn't improve and eventually, his contract leaves and contract expires and he exits, or was Ryan Kelly with the same thing. And he just sort of gets put in the crock pot. And it's just a matter of how much are you willing to spend on a guy that you're just not going to be able to use him for the first year or two of his rookie deal, depending on how quickly he comes along.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fair thing to bring up, especially in the context of the Vikings, right? Who don't need to have that player start right away. So you'd rather probably have somebody who has an impact at 24 than somebody you want to, like you said, put in the slow cooker for a couple of years. So yeah, just go a little bit on Donovan Jackson, or if you don't have all that much on him, that's fine. And we'll move on to Shavon Revel, who is your third pick. And I think it's Shavon Revel, right? It's Shavon.
It's Shavon, or I've been saying Shavon, but you don't pronounce the H.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. He is just a really good corner. He's going to drop because he played for a small school, which, much like Gray Zabel, I see the level of athleticism where I'm not worried about it. Like you look athletically more dominant, or dominant enough among that competition where I feel totally okay. And he plays a physical brand. He's unbelievably smooth with his hips. And one of those things, like with those small school guys, like I wanted to look up why were you at Eastern Carolina? Were you a 2-star recruit that just was a late bloomer? Is there something fraudulent going on here? What was it? And for Revel, it was grades, and it was wanting to stay close to his family. He has a very tragic story. You're going to hear some, I'm sure, borderline insensitive trauma piece on ESPN when he gets drafted. And yeah, just get ready for that eye roll. But he has been through a lot, and his family's been through a lot, and he didn't want it. Alabama wanted him, and he was like, I don't want to be that far away from my family. So if this guy did play at Bama, I think he's up there with Will Johnson, honestly. And the other problem, though, is that he got hurt. He tore his ACL. All reports that I have heard are that that's not going to affect him into training camp, and that things are more or less checking out the way you would want them to. But that's, whenever I hear stuff, it's always third hand. So take that however you will. But it's like, those are the two main things that are going to drop him. And I'm like very not worried about either of them. Dude's just a good corner.
Yeah. So I do think it's interesting, right? Because I think he's going to drop past out of the first round. It's just the way everybody has him in terms of the big draft media, right? And those are the guys that are most plugged into what the teams are thinking. But I could also see a team just taking a shot and shooting their shot on him because I could totally see the traits are so good. The interesting thing to me, right, is I think a player like Quinyon Mitchell last year, who's a similar kind of, maybe not story, but, from a small school in Toledo, right, compared to ECU, he went to the Senior Bowl and he dominated, right? And that's what made him, I think he was actually the first corner drafted last year, even though it was like in the 20s, right, to the Eagles, of course. If Revel hadn't had the ACL and had gone to the Senior Bowl and had dominated, I think he would be for sure a first-round pick. Now, we can't project that he would actually have done all of that, right? So it's a little bit unfair to say like, oh, if he didn't get injured, this would have happened. But I think there's a pretty good chance it would have, because even you go back to the Michigan tape from last year, right? Which I think you did.
Yeah.
And it's like, I remember JJ McCarthy having a phenomenal game against East Carolina, and not only just like, it was Michigan beating up on a small school, but like McCarthy was making throws. They weren't against Revel, right? Like it was against the other corners.
Right. No, it was all other side of the field, safeties, other stuff going wrong. Yeah.
So it's, definitely a positive to see that there against that high level competition. Besides Revel, there's like a glut of corners that people have in the late first round, early second round. Maxwell, Hairston, Azareye'h Thomas. I don't actually know how you say that name. Benjamin Morrison.
Azareye'h.
Azareye'h,
I think. Yeah.
Benjamin Morrison, who has his own injury concerns, and Trey Amos. Of those guys, I think you said you like Hairston the best. Talk a little bit about him, and if you've seen any of the other guys, just give us a quick lowdown and maybe where your limit for each of those is, in terms of drafting them.
Yeah, so I've watched all of those guys. I like Hairston. I think he's just like a pretty good corner. The way he drops the footwork's good. The recovery speed is good. He relies on it maybe a little bit too much. That's pretty common for a young corner, but it also shows, hey, dude's fast. You're gonna have a nice quick corner. I have Maxwell. Hairston was another one that I was like, you know what? If they picked him at 24, I probably wouldn't complain about it very much, but he's definitely somebody that I wouldn't expect you to have to. In large part because of the other corners. Trey Amos and Azareye'h Thomas are very much a matter of taste to me. I see them very similarly. I have Trey Amos as a better fit for Flores because he's a little bit more used to off-man coverage and the techniques therein, whereas Azareye'h Thomas wants to press, step up, get in your face. And with how much Flores blitzes, you don't always get to press, so you're not going to get as much of that skill set. So I think he's a better fit elsewhere. But both of those guys are, I think, okay corner. I got them both as second rounders. And then Benjamin Morrison would probably be CB1 for me outside. Well, CB2 after Will Johnson, I guess, were it not for the injury. I have heard that the injury news at his medical checks were worse than bad, was the phrase used for me. It's a hip labrum and it's bad. So that seems to be like a genuine, not risk, but like, oh, this is like not going to be the same guy and you're lucky if it is kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is heartbreaking because that dude, his tape rules. He's super
no.
good. Yeah, it's hard. I couldn't keep watching. I was like, God, this is just making me mad because it's just going to be a thing. If he does stay healthy throughout his career, like he absolutely has the chance to me to be a guy that gets taken at pick 162 because everyone's so worried about his medicals and then becoming just like a star throughout his whole career because you just get lucky. But you kind of just have to understand that you're asking to get lucky when you're drafting him. Yeah. So that puts him for me in like the 40s to the 90s. Like if you found a way to trade up from 97 kind of thing. Or if you depending on where you are, if you trade down, like if you trade down and get a second and a third, you take him with a third you got kind of guy. But I have no idea where he goes. There could be a team that absolutely thinks his hip is fine and takes him at 15. And I think that his tape is honestly like worth it. It's just that the medicals are a huge red flag.
Hey, that's really good information to have on him. And it's weird because if the Vikings take him, I would give the Vikings the benefit of the doubt in that situation.
For sure.
Just because of their history with those injured athletes. But I don't think any Vikings fan would be able to get out of the Andrew Booth pick out of their head, right? As somebody who also had medical concerns.
Boy.
Man, I loved Andrew Booth's tape. And I think I probably didn't know as much about the position as I do now.
Yeah.
But like, it would be interesting to have that kind of pick in that kind of range again with a player with major medical concerns. So
I think I listened to that episode with you and Nick. Yeah. Going over all the corners pre-draft, and you like kind of talked me into him a little bit. And I went back and like listened to it again after they picked him. I was like, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, I did have Derrick Stingley as my CB1, so I feel pretty good about that. So I also
that's a nice call. Although it's probably now I guess it's debatable with Sauce because he kind of had a down year. But
I also did not like Trent McDuffie, so I got that one on my face.
Yeah.
So
me either. But I didn't like him for the Vikings. But the second he went to the Chiefs, I was like, oh yeah, that'll work.
Well, and that's the thing for me with Jahdae Barron this year is I can't get out of my head that the Vikings corners are Byron Murphy, who's 5'9" with sub 30-inch arms. Isaiah Rodgers, who's 5'10" and like 170 pounds with 29-inch arms. And Mekhi Blackman, who's like 170 pounds soaking wet with 31-inch arms and 5'11". Those are the Vikings corners right now.
Yeah. Here's a weird thing. I don't know if Barron is as versatile as they say. He just had to play nickel last year and then had to play outside this year. Like, being able to play both is a valuable experience. But all of his whole final year, he played deep third and mod out on the outside. Like, he was glued to the outside, and that was what he did. He just did so from like maybe different alignments or whatever, but like it was actually a pretty samey role, and that was more about Texas. But Andrew Makuba was kind of their like fly around the field guy.
Yeah.
Who's also really short.
And we're gonna get to him, but
yeah, but I found it really interesting. I kept expecting to see him in all these different spots moving around the field, but really it's just that they parked him somewhere and said, this is your job. And they just changed what that was year to year, but they gave him a whole offseason to get used to it. I would wonder if you can really Swiss Army knife him over a game the same way, but I also might be like deeply overthinking that. Like, he can play nickel, he can play corner. What's your...
Yeah, I guess my thought process for the Vikings is you don't need to Swiss Army knife him because you have Byron Murphy who already does that for you, right? Yeah. In terms of that inside out flexibility. And what leveled up the Vikings defense last year was honestly the corner additions. For as like inconsistent as Stephon Gilmore and Shaq Griffin were, just because they were kind of washed, right? Like, they weren't at the top of their game.
They were hidden too.
There was
a lot of squat, a lot of flats.
Here's the thing. They were still so much better than what we had the year before with a Caleb Evans and Mekhi Blackman that we could play man coverage when we wanted to. Like, and it wasn't perfect.
A little bit, yeah.
But we played it quite a bit more. So it went from being a middle of the pack defense that was a disaster towards the end of the year to like one of the best defenses in the league. Right. So I do think they really made that difference, which is why I want to see another bigger outside corner, because the size and length that those guys had, I think, helped them quite a bit over the course of the season.
There's Revel for you. I think my like dream scenario is like trade down, draft Revel, draft Jared Wilson.
Hey.
And then keep 97. That would be, the pie in the sky to me. The real pie in the sky is Kenneth Grant Falls, but I don't see it.
Yeah, no, you've talked me into that part. So I think we got through all the guys you mentioned as potential top 5 picks. I do want to cover the safeties just because, they're a huge topic of conversation. I know you on your 4-0 Friday talked to Tyler Forness, and he's like, yeah, everybody puts Nick Emmanwori to the Vikings. And I listened to like a bunch of like national podcasts, like Mina's show and stuff like that. And everybody, when they bring up Nick Emmanwori to the Vikings, they just salivate. Oh, look at what Brian Flores could do with Nick Emmanwori. Look at what Harrison Smith could teach Nick Emmanwori. And I just don't think that's how the safety position works, man. Like, these guys got to be smart when they come into the league. Or I don't know if it's something you're going to teach them. I don't know. That's just me. I watched Lewis Cine be awful for 3 preseasons straight, and I'm out on it.
Yeah. And that guy could have Swiss Army knifed for sure. Like, that guy had all kinds of ability to move around.
You know who has a 996 RAS because he didn't run the 3-cone and the short shuttle? And the only reason he's less than a 10 probably is because he was 200 pounds instead of 230 pounds. Lewis Cine.
Yep. And guess who didn't run the 3-cone? Emmanwori's athleticism is a lie. I'm ready to say it. This is maybe the spicy take that's going to get me in the most trouble with Vikings fans, because I think both Starks and Emmanwori are both not first rounders and not very good fits for the Vikings. And both of that is because they are not aggressive safeties. Neither of these guys are like triggering downhill, or like, you think about like you're the weak side safety. It's trips. There's a guy coming over the field and you're going to like come pop him, right? You think that Harrison Smith play where you're just going to like lay an absolute hit on him. These guys don't do it. They don't have that killer instinct when they're coming in on a, on a play in the flat. There's an example. I'm working on a Malaki Starks video for Patreon right now. And there's an example from, I think it was the Texas game, might have been Bama, but where he kind of dips under the lineman on a little like screen out to the flat, and he's just going to blow it up. It's a really nice play. And he kind of like breaks down and very safely makes the tackle. Huge tackle for loss. Awesome highlight.
Yeah.
But he doesn't like pop it. And there, it doesn't matter. It's a great play. We're really happy with it. But when it comes to plays again, like Jalen Milroe made mincemeat of him, just by waiting for him to break down and then using that stop in his feet to like get around him. Just a really, really cautious player, really hesitant player, hesitant tackler, and leaves late sometimes because he's just not quite sure that he trusts what he's seeing. That all that stuff is so not Floresy. Floresy wants somebody aggressive, wants somebody that's going to fly downhill, trigger, pop the absolute heck out of some stupid little slot receiver thinking that he's cool running a bubble screen, and you want to just like pulverize that guy, pound him into a fine mist. Emmanwori is the same. I think both of those guys are finessey. They're coverage center fielder safeties, and I do not see them having versatile roles at the next level. I see them being half safeties, playing on the roof, coming down from the alley in the run fit, maybe, but I do not see those guys as like box players at the next level. I don't see them as Flores fits at all. And I would be pretty disappointed if those guys, either one of those guys, were the pick at 20.
Yeah, and the way you describe Starks coming down against the run would give me particular concern for the Vikings, because they're going to have to play Jahmyr Gibbs 2 times a year. And like,
oh my God, Gibbs kills both these guys.
And like,
oh my God, it's ugly.
I love Cam Bynum. I wish the Vikings would have re-signed Cam Bynum. I kind of low-key, and this will get me in a lot of trouble, I kind of low-key wish Harrison Smith had just retired and the Vikings could have just re-signed Cam Bynum, and that would have been the Vikings safety move.
I heard when you said that take, and I have it now too. I'm like, actually, he's cooking.
Yeah. Like, as much as I want Harrison Smith to literally be a Hall of Famer, and it's not going to happen because the postseason awards voting in the 2010s was irreparably screwed up by the Legion of Boom. Sorry, I'm getting off on a complete tangent. Cam Bynum could not take an angle against Jahmyr Gibbs. The reason Jahmyr Gibbs killed the Vikings is Cam Bynum could not tackle him. He could not get in his way.
Man, if you like bad tackling angles that lead to embarrassing misses, let me show you Malaki Starks. It's not good.
And that's
and he's not athletic. He's the really bad 3-cone, really bad agility testing. You can see it on tape,
and that's what.
And I think you can see what it would have been for Emmanwori if he had taken those tests.
And I posted a skeet, I guess, where, and this was an Emmanwori take. It wasn't a Malaki Starks take, but if you look at the players who got an All-Pro vote for safety, if you look at the players who got extended to large contracts for safety, most of them are middling athletes. Like, they're not great athletes. If you look at all of the highly drafted athletes at safety, like the late first round guys, early second round guys, basically none of them are good. Like, your good players are Derwin James and Kyle Hamilton, and Kyle Hamilton had everybody hemming and hawing about him because he ran a 4.6, right? Like, it was nonsense that people thought he wasn't a good athlete. Oh, hi, puppy. Thought he wasn't a good athlete because he ran a 4.6, but like, it happened, right? If you look at all the other guys who are like good in the league, and a lot of these aren't even first round picks, right? Like a Justin Simmons, who was good for a long time, wasn't a first round pick. Like, you can get by at the position, which is why I just don't see it as a fit for the Vikings at 24, honestly.
Yeah.
But Obi Melifonwu is who my comp for Nick Emmanwori would be, just from listening to you, because he was the guy who jumped out of the gym. I mean, he had like a 44-inch vert. He broke, I think it was the same year it was Byron Jones. They were both coming out of UConn, and like, they both broke like combine records that year with what they were doing from athletic testing standpoint. But he wasn't a box safety. He wasn't comfortable moving forward. He had to be a deep safety, and it didn't work out. I think he was like a second round pick by the Raiders. But
yeah.
Anyway, sorry. That's kind of a rant. I think we both kind of see it the same way. I'll let you talk about Andrew Makuba, and then if you like anybody else at the safety position, I don't know if you've watched the Notre Dame guy, Watts, I think, or the Penn State guy, Winston.
Yeah, I watched the Notre Dame guy at the same time as I was watching Benjamin Morrison, and while Benjamin Morrison was making me mad because he was so good, and I knew it wasn't gonna. He's like so good, but I can't have it. And I was mad about that. Xavier Watts was making me mad because that dude is just Charmin ultra soft. I just saw him get absolutely just clobbered by, and it's like, man, and like, honestly, Malaki Starks is getting close to getting the S word from me too. It's like, that was a big problem with both of these guys, and I think safety in general, agility is so important, so much more important than a 40 time. I couldn't give two craps about your 40 time. You know, that's and let Kyle Hamilton be the example of
examples. You have to react to plays and you have to turn. You don't have to run in a straight line.
Right. Like, what 40 would you think Harrison Smith would run right? He'd run like a 5.2 right now, man. Yeah. Like, he's old, but he can leave so early that it doesn't matter. It's the best way to get there early is to leave early. And so I don't care about how fast you are, but agility wise, when you're breaking on a route, that has to be reactive, right? You can't guess what a route is unless you're real good at the tape study stuff. But for the most part, you have to wait for a sign. You have to wait for that person to declare, and then you have to react. And both of those guys just get totally caught up in the turf when they do that. They just don't have that really smooth, natural footwork and agility. And I think just natural agility to be able to, sit there in off man and drive down on a basic and get an interception. Or, turn and run on a post or, recover after they've bitten on a double move from Jamison Williams, like that won't, I don't see them being successful at that. And it gives me a lot of pause for them in the league at all. And certainly for the Vikings as a fit, I do see Andrew Makuba having that. And I know he's another small D-back, like we're just going to have the tiniest little secondary made of scrappy dudes in the world. But I see the physicality that I was missing with those. Like, it was refreshing. I watched Emmanwori, I watched Starks, spent a bunch of time on them, and I was like, man, like, I guess I can talk myself into this, knowing that it's like a likely pick, being a bit of a homer about it. And then I watched Makuba, and I was like, oh, this is what it means to like a safety. Okay, I just don't like those guys. And the versatility you wish you were getting, the physicality you wish you were getting, the agility you wish you were getting. He checks all of those boxes for me. I actually would, if they picked him at 24 based on his tape, I would 100% get it. And for me, he is safety one. I have him above those two guys. That's the take everyone's going to absolutely flip out at me over. And I'm ready to stand in their face and say, yes, you are all wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, just based on the profile, like, I get everybody salivates over the 40 time and the jumps and the size and whatever, but it's like, that's not what matters at safety. Like, I think people need to recognize the ability to react is what's most important at safety. It just is. Like, you have to be there mentally to be able to athletically execute on what you do. And that's true for any position. But I think the deep position where you are trying to see what's unfolding in front of you is where it's absolutely the most important. And I think it's almost similar to running back to an extent where, like, you can get away without being the most agile running back in the world, or you can get away without being the most athletically gifted running back in the world if you can understand how blocks unfold and hit the holes in those situations. Like, Jordan Mason was a great example of that, where his three cone's like terrible. I mean, it's and Dalvin Cook is like the historical example, right? Yeah. And it's like, these guys, if they're smart enough to see how things are able to unfold, it doesn't matter, because they can find their way into those areas and find their way to make the plays on the back end. So a lot of ranting about the top 5 that we probably covered pretty much everybody. People are thinking about the Vikings drafting at 24. I do want to get into a little bit of the later guys, but I also want to ask a question, like, let's say you're Kwesi sitting in the draft, dude, and we know Kwesi gets antsy about getting his guys a little bit, right? Like, it definitely happened with the Dallas Turner trade up, that sort of thing. Is there anybody I excluded, or let's throw Kenneth Grant into this, right? If they start dropping, let's say it's, 17, 18, 19, 20, something like that you, Luke Braun, in your GM chair, be willing to spend the draft capital to trade up for, or would you rather just kind of sit there? And this includes, obviously you don't have to say like, oh yeah, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, like, obviously, right?
Yeah, like guys that are, it's ridiculous if we got like gas mask situations. Yeah, excluding gas mask situations, the only one that I'm high enough on to really consider it, and its position of need and all that, would have been like Kenneth Grant or Will Johnson.
Sure.
Will Johnson, I'll be honest, I didn't look at super hard because it just seems super locked in that he's just going to go like top 12 and is not going to really be in range. So like, whatever. It's like, I didn't watch Jeff Okudah that year either. Like we all knew it's not going to be an option. So whatever. But I did look at him enough to at least see, okay, he's as advertised. So I'm not going to have any hot takes there. Consensus is probably right. So yeah, Will Johnson or Kenneth Grant, I guess. But otherwise, like, all these other names you gave me are can be somebody else's. And if they're starting to fall to me, I think I'd rather hope that they are still there on the board at 24 and that I can get someone to trade up about it.
Yeah. All right. Is there anybody you would want to take at 24 if they fall, or you would be like over the moon, or otherwise you would absolutely not want the Vikings to take, and maybe it would be like tragic, right, if the Vikings take them? I think that's maybe the more interesting one, right? Like, obviously,
yeah,
you get a guy who falls, you know, you're probably going to be excited about that just because they were rated highly, but like, it's not a position of need, and you don't think maybe they will live up to the billing of like a top 15 pick like they're supposed to be.
Yeah, we've already talked about most of the names that I would answer there. Like the Gray Zabel thing would be a nightmare to me. That would just feel like you're just begging to have 2 years of tapping your watch and tapping your foot and wondering where the rookie is. I have a pretty high likelihood of being disappointed this year, I feel like, because both Malaki Starks and Nick Emmanwori at 24 would disappoint me. For me, the would pick at 24 tier of guys that I have watched, so this is far from comprehensive, is Tyler Booker. I have Donovan Jackson tentatively there. I'm going to probably try to, catch up on him and really finish that evaluation. It's unfinished, but it's where I have him to start at least. Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Jahdae Barron. Have I been saying that wrong? It's Jahdae.
I think
Barron?
it's Jahdae. That's what I've heard, but it's so weird.
Shavon, Revel, and Maxwell Hairston. That is end of list. That doesn't include. I didn't watch like Luther Burden or Jihad Campbell or any of those guys. Sure. I have no idea. That if they draft them, I'll watch them then. But I'm kind of sticking to the positions I think it is to try to focus my energy.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So call me agnostic on those. I don't know. That's it. End of list. There's probably some people missing from that list. There's no running backs, no safeties on that list. I don't think there is a first round running back in this class, which is also maybe a pretty hot take because I think there will be.
Oh yeah, everybody loves Ashton Genty, so.
Well, and O'Marion Hampton might go first. Might go first round too. I just don't. I won't agree with it when it happens. I just don't think either of those guys are game changers enough to make it worth it. I think like running back value wise, Jonathan Taylor went in the second, and I think that was appropriate. If Ashton Genty can be Jonathan Taylor, be your bell cow dude, good for you. But I don't know if it like defines the offense in a way that the Colts are happy with, as evidenced by them, trying to get cheaper on the interior line and not necessarily being the same bruiser team that they were before. But yeah, and then when it comes to like wide receivers, tight ends, linebackers, all that stuff, ask someone else.
Yeah. So I just want to get a couple of hot takes off here because these are both pretty hot. Tyler Warren, I don't like at all. Like, I don't know if he's a first round tight end. Because he's just tall Kyle Juszczyk. Is the take. So and this is mostly synthesized from like hearing how people talk to him. He is apparently not a good blocker. Like, the way people talk about Tyler Warren, you would think he's a good blocker, but even the guys who are positive on Tyler Warren are like, he's a willing blocker. He doesn't technically execute blocks well.
Right?
Yeah, that's how you know.
So is Ashton Genty's a willing blocker, but that guy is built like a fruit fly and just will die. Like,
yeah, and it's like
be a limit to that.
It's like, so you're selling me on this player because he's basically, I don't know, Rob Gronkowski, the next coming of Rob Gronkowski, right? And he can't block all that well, and he doesn't win one-on-one as a route runner. Like, he's a yards after catch guy who like is a super fun football player, and that's why Kyle Juszczyk is the comp, because Kyle Juszczyk is an awesome football player. Like, he's super cool to have on your team and on the football field, but I can't, like, it's blowing my mind that people want somebody like that in the top 10. Also, he's like 24 years old, right? And this is his only year of production. So that's a major red flag. Like, I don't know, man. It's wild to me. The other one is Jalon Walker. I don't think is a good football player either, because the way people talk about him is the same thing. He's a 6'1", like, not long, or I guess he's got longer arms, was playing off-ball linebacker, but isn't all that athletic. Like, Micah Parsons is so good because he's an absolutely ridiculous athletic freak, right? And the comp is Micah Parsons. Well, if you take Micah Parsons without the athleticism, what do you have? You have a bad football player. I don't know. I don't get it. Anyway, Sorry.
I can't say anything about either of those guys. I will jump on the tight end thing with you. Colston Loveland, bad player. Mike Gesicki, second coming. Don't take him in the first.
AJ Barner was better. AJ Barner was better in 2023 or whatever that
was. Some of that comes from like holdover from being frustrated with him when watching JJ McCarthy's tape.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Like I said before, I'm not holding your junior year against you if you played better in your senior year. I haven't seen much of his senior year, but I've seen enough kind of through osmosis watching like Big Ten defenders against Michigan to see that it doesn't look very different to me.
Oh, no.
Still a little bit of a bozo.
If you hear
still a good route runner, like, but just an absolute liability in the box. Oh my God, that dude is a mark if you're trying to make him block.
If you hear anything about any draft analysts talk about Colston Loveland, they're like, you really got to go back to the 2023 tape to see what this player is. And it's just like,
no.
Yeah.
Like I felt so not to rehash this because we did this whole thing last year. I felt so insane listening to people talk about Michigan supporting cast. Because when I turned on that tape, I expected to see this like Alabama-esque polish pro.
I'm sorry, Roman Wilson sucked, by the way. He's bad. He's not good.
Yeah, he didn't make it at all. Yeah. He was the only guy I thought was like doing anything at all. I mean, like Cornelius Johnson, total bozo. Colston Loveland, total bozo. Pass pro busts all over the place. Just disaster tape from 10 out of 11 guys. And JJ McCarthy just holding that thing together like Spider-Man in the train.
Like, 15-0 national championship. Insane.
Like, oh my God. That dude was doing everything for everybody. And that is a take that you can go back and find date stamped before the draft. I wasn't even being a homer yet. But I felt so insane hearing people talk about like, this is like stacked with NFL talent. Like, no, the heck it is not.
Yeah. So sorry, we got off a tangent here, but we talked a ton about trading back.
I'm here to ruin your show.
No, absolutely. I think this is what the listeners come here for, because I keep putting out hour and a half pods and people thank me for it sometimes. So I must be doing something okay. But the trade back, I think, is going to be the most popular thing that Vikings fans want. It's definitely what I think both of us want, depending on what the options are, or like what we think the realistic options are going to be, right? So I guess the question for me is, what teams do you think it's realistic to trade back with? Because I also keep hearing from people in the draft, and this happens every year, but like everybody wants to trade back. Right? Like nobody really wants to tell, but I think
nobody wants to trade up. That's the problem.
It's super true this year. So do you have any team targets in mind for trade ups? I got a few.
The only idea I can think of is we got to hope that this Jackson Dart steam is real.
Yeah. Or Shedeur Sanders falls mega.
Yeah. Shedeur Sanders has an Aaron Rodgers type fall, which is not outside of the realm of possibility at all. The reporting around the Browns and Giants is something I've been a little bit more tuned into, both because it's interesting, but also because maybe that's the team, right? So if they go Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter 2 and 3 in whatever order, then they're both going to probably be looking to get a young quarterback at some point. And whether it's Shedeur Sanders falling or Jackson Dart, having that hype being real and not being like this weird, Spencer Rattler hype thing, where it ends up that he goes, 120th, and what was everyone talking about? But if that becomes the case, then you can get those guys to kind of clamor against each other. But I don't know why they would be talking to the team at 24, unless you were able to be. Unless Kwesi was able to make it known that, hey, we are the guys.
We're the trade out team.
We are the team to trade up with. And if you don't, they will. I don't know if Kwesi quite has that negotiation chops. I don't know if he has the relation. I mean, he's got relationships in Cleveland, of course.
Of course, yeah.
I don't know if he has the ones in New York. And I don't know if he quite has that like media manipulation gene yet. It comes with a little more experience. And I think, as evidenced by last year, everybody knew they wanted to trade up for a quarterback. And I think that made it harder for them to get a deal that they liked, because they just didn't quite have the ability to, pit. There's a world where you could at least spread a rumor that Washington wanted to trade down with you and you better get on it, New England. Otherwise, I'm going to leapfrog you and take your guy kind of thing. Or make it, a little bit like it just didn't seem like they were being pretty straight up about it. And I think that hurt them. So I really want them to trade down. I really, really, really do.
Me too.
But it's going to be an uphill battle to do that because of the way the board is and because of the kind of narrative manipulation you're going to have to do. Because if I'm Cleveland or New York, I'm looking at 30. Why would you even think of going all the way up to 24? Nobody in that bottom 10 picks of the first round needs a quarterback. You do not need to leapfrog everybody and come up that high.
Yeah, so you literally have to sell them that this other team is coming up for the quarterback to leapfrog me here. And it is nice because both the Browns and the Giants have extra third-round picks in the comp range. So that it could be like their second-round pick plus the very late third, right? And then the Browns actually have 4 6th-round picks. I just pulled this up right now. So they can make pretty effective change, right, with all of those 6th-round picks. And it's appealing to the Vikings, who only have 4 picks in terms of trading back in that range. The other team, other than the guys looking for a quarterback, which, first of all, I don't understand why any of these quarterbacks would merit a trade up back into the first round, including Shedeur Sanders, by the way. Like, I watched Kyrie Jackson play against Colorado. I didn't need to see any more of Shedeur Sanders after that. At least
he's gotten better than it was since. Okay, he was a disaster that year. He's polished up quite a bit.
Is his deep ball? Does his deep ball still die after like 20 yards? Because I don't want that as the starting quarterback of my team. But
he's gotten better mechanically. I still don't really like the way he drops. He still is kind of a backpedal dropper like Bryce Young, and I don't think that that's right for the NFL. That'll probably want to change. But it's funny on Heed the Call, Jordan Rodriguez was like, nobody get mad at me, but Kirk Cousins, and like made that comp, and it kind of makes sense where you're just going to get this really boring, like if it's on time, everything's fine kind of QB. And but like a little fragile, a little delicate to, non-ideal circumstances on a given play, and then just like athletically not the kind of guy that like has the highest ceiling of ceilings. If he's going to make it in the league, he's going to have to make it in the same way that like Brock Purdy worked it out, where like you're just going to have to be like uber mega precise. Like if he's Drew Brees, that's like the best, the best way he can work out is going to be the way that Drew Brees did it, where Drew Brees was never this like hyper athlete. It was always just about precision and being really smart and being that way. And that's just not the kind of guy that I think he's been. So the fact that he's going 3rd overall, I think is just 100% a product of the class and the deficiencies elsewhere on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard for me to see them trade up. And I also agree that I think at this point, Carter and Hunter, in whichever order, are going 2 and 3. Like, to me, I just don't expect those teams to actually pull the trigger on a quarterback at 3. So,
yeah,
the trade up,
the Giants are obfuscating it just for like trade reasons.
The trade back option I really liked.
It's happening.
Was one of those guys falling to the Patriots and then being forced to take them, right? Because the value was just there for the type of player as opposed to taking a tackle. And then the Patriots realizing they need a tackle and come way up back into the first round to get that tackle, right? Because they have nobody. I mean, they're starting Vidarian Lowe at left tackle. That's their left tackle option.
Are they still?
Yes.
Who did they just get from us?
Bradbury.
That's not a thing.
Yeah, they got Bradbury. Exactly. So, hey, Siggy, calm down. Sorry, my dog has decided we are going too long, but I do want to keep up going a couple of things here. But essentially, I would really like them come up if they don't take a tackle in the first round for some reason, or if they want one of these wide receivers, right, who they think is falling down the board or something like that. If you're like really because those are where they're 2 very clear needs. Like they absolutely need to take one of those 2 positions with their first overall pick, right? And nobody sees Tet as that kind of high level player. Last thing before we get out of here, right? And the Vikings have so many needs in the mid to late round. I know you haven't watched a ton of guys in that range. Obviously, CJ West is going to be one of them for you, right? Because even if you'd be willing to take him, late first round, nobody in the NFL is probably going to take him in that time frame. So you can probably get him at a 97, like almost certainly in the draft. Just based on what the general consensus is, right?
I'd be doing backflips.
Right.
Once we get to pick 40, I'm going to start chanting CJ West with candles lit around me.
Yeah. But any players at any position that you see in that range?
So looking at, this is where I'll come back around to the Georgia interior line. Again, Jared Wilson is just a good stout center, excellent pass pro. Seems like they're always in the right place, which I credit to the center. And the doubles with him are great. Tate Ratledge is awesome. I like Dylan Fairchild a lot, but he's a day 3 pick because he didn't pull. They would either take him out of the formation or they would switch him to the backside to the play side so that he wouldn't have to pull. So that's probably really bad. I've never seen that before, but he was not allowed to pull. So that's probably a huge red flag that's going to sink you a lot, but he's phenomenal at everything. He's really good guard at everything else. If you don't end up getting a D tackle high, there are guys I have no idea where Shamar Turner goes. I've seen him all over the place in big boards and mock drafts.
He's Texas A&M, right?
In borderline first. Yeah. A&M playing next to the other Shamar at A&M. That whole A&M line, by the way, is awesome. I like the other edge too, Nick Scorton.
Yep. He's like a fringe first rounder,
get an Aggie. Just get an Aggie in your life on defense. Get a Georgia Bulldog in your life on offense, and you'll be very happy. So I have no idea where Shamar Turner goes. I've seen him in the 2nd. I've seen him in the 6th in mock drafts and stuff. So I have no idea what the deal is there, but I like him. I think he's a good player. If you want a true DPR, like a true, a let's get pressure, third downs only kind of guy, take a Gamecock. Either of those would be fine. Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders. One pick at 97 guy that if it's not a running back, that I've seen suggested a lot is Billy Bowman at
he's
Oklahoma.
A safety.
He's a safety. He is a very downhill kind of safety. I think he's super raw. I think that's a project, but one that you might want to take at 97 and just bide your time with while Harrison Smith plays out the rest of his career. And then if you want to talk running backs, we can talk running backs. I love DJ Giddens as a third round
absolutely,
running back.
Because
super hashtag my guy.
I think one of the last 2 picks at this point, I would want the Vikings to take a running back, right? Just keep getting people into that rotation, have a plan for Aaron Jones.
And there's a ton of running backs that I haven't watched. I've probably only gotten through a handful of them. But there's probably some guys in the 6th and 7th that you're going to be really excited about. I actually here's another spicy take right now. I think Travion Henderson has the brightest future in the league of any running back in this class. There's a lot of upside. There's a lot of polish and stuff there and pass pro and stuff that you get with Jahdae that you don't get with him. So everybody that's going to have Jahdae way over Henderson and thinks I'm insane, I get it. I'm not going to super come out and say everybody in the world is super wrong. But for me, I just see that home run potential in a way that I cannot get with Quinshon Judkins, the other Ohio State one, with Omarion Hampton, with Caleb Johnson, all of these guys that played slow ball. Even Giddens, who I love, played slow ball, ran a great 40, but just you're going to get hawked. Those guys, you can see them running down the field. They are going to get hawked by, they're just going to get run down. And Travion Henderson won't, and Ashton Jahdae won't. Those are kind of the only 2 guys in this class that I have watched that I feel that way about. But I don't know. Maybe there's some, the greatest back in the class is out there, and I just haven't even thought to look at him.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird for me because that's the kind of back I tend to gravitate against. I love the plotting guys who make the right decisions all the time. It's just the archetype.
Alexander Madison's all the way down.
Yeah,
it's just all of these it's Alexander Madison's with vision. That's what Omarion Hampton is, which is a pretty good package. Yeah,
yeah, and hopefully more burst because the burst really sunk Madison too by the end there. It just wasn't there.
That's no. That's an issue is that he's not flashing through the whole super well. Omarion Hampton does okay. DJ Giddens does okay. Caleb Johnson, that guy's never getting through. I have him as a 5th.
Okay.
Which is, I know, total sacrilege to people.
I'm not an Iowa Hawkeye, so I don't really care.
Yeah.
Right. So anybody and again, you probably haven't watched any of these guys. Anybody like late round quarterback? Obviously, the Vikings still only have 2 quarterbacks, so we're probably going to see aggregator.
One might be in the cards.
Yeah,
go get Tyler Shuck and say, yeah, well, he's a 7-year veteran already. Like, you want a veteran backup? Yeah, how about him? Mentor, right? No, the only guy I have even like a modicum of a take on is Will Howard, and that's just because I've watched a lot of defenders against Ohio State, and I keep seeing him. And actually, I think that guy can sling it okay. He's older, no ceiling, but we're talking about 5th round picks here. You're not asking this guy to be the next big thing in the league. You're just asking him to give Brett Rippon a run for his money for the QB job. The standard there is low enough that I think a 5th or 6th or even 7th round quarterback is a pretty appropriate choice for the Vikings if they end up keeping or gaining picks in those rounds.
I agree too, because the problem is the standard at the free agent market for quarterbacks is also at the Brett Rippon level at this point. So there's
it's like Carson Wentz or hope Ryan Tannehill has anything left in the tank. It's like, oof.
It is what it is, because they made the decision that I think they made a mistake by letting Nick Mullins walk to the Jags. Like, I would have just paid him the contract that the Jags gave him, but it was also hard because that was the first thing that got reported before the Sam Darnold and before the Daniel Jones thing. So it's like they were really stuck there. If they wanted Daniel Jones, you can't also sign Nick Mullins to guaranteed money, right? Like, it makes it a lot harder. I guess you could have, but
yeah, you do kind of wish he was still around. And it's crazy. Like, so there was a report from Darren Wilson a couple days ago over on the Purple Daily on the Scoops podcast that Joe Flacco called him, and they were like, "No." And Joe Flacco signed for like $4 million. So like Joe Flacco for $4 million is a no. Aaron Rodgers says that he would have taken $10 million. That was a hard no. They said like, no, thank you. Stay by your phone if he gets hurt. Like, that's basically what they told him. Then, Daniel Jones at $15 million, no. Sam Darnold at $30 million, no. Like, that's a choosy team, and I don't know if there's a better option than what those are at backup now left over, unless they feel really good about one of these rookies, and we just don't know about it yet.
Yeah. No, I think it might be the path. So let's trade down. Let's find a mythical trade partner who, like we discussed, doesn't really exist, and then get a bunch of draft capital and do the PFF mock simulator on this thing.
They're certainly going to try. I think they'll definitely try. But we'll see if they maybe there's a guy they're more excited about than we are. Maybe we're just too doomery. We've just become old and curmudgeon-y. It's been cold out for too long, right?
Yeah, definitely your Los Angeles weather. Cold out.
I was speaking for you. Okay? We're doing fine over here. It's like 60. It's nice.
It was 60 here today. I grilled, so it was great.
Beautiful.
And that, I think, is how I'm going to wrap it up, because I have taken way too much of your time, Luke. But this was fantastic as always. I had a phenomenal time chopping it up with you here.
Yeah, I always have a great time with you. I don't care. I'll go on 3 hours with you. It's fun. It's
wonderful.
Fine. It's fun.
Good luck on your more than 3 hour long broadcast of day 3 of the NFL draft.
That's going to be rough.
Next Saturday.
Come watch me suffer on the Minnesota Football Party, and Locked On Vikings YouTube feeds. They'll be simulcast on both.
There we go. And that's where you can find Luke. He is at Luke Braun NFL on Blue Sky. Also, check out his Patreon, Luke Braun, patreon.com/Luke Braun NFL. It is fantastic stuff. You get everything he talked about on basically all the prospects we get in depth to with video clips. So it's really great stuff. And, I just really appreciate how you approach it from a technical and individual movement perspective, because I think that's what translates over into what actually happens at the NFL level, rather than, and you've gone on rants about this, but like talking about the pressure numbers that an individual player had in the college season, because
I try to remove proxies as much as possible. I think anything, production is a proxy. It's saying, well, he got a lot of sacks, therefore that's the best simulation we have to say that he's going to get a lot of sacks in the NFL. You're using a proxy. I think athletic testing is the same way. And I think the best way to do it is to just take the plunge, be willing to be wrong, and say, okay, well, how does this lateral step work? that lateral step is going to translate to the NFL because they use that. And you're going to be able to just come out and do that right away and no assembly required and be happy. And like, I feel like that's the way to do it. The problem is that's a lot of stuff to juggle and there's a lot of opportunities to be wrong. So you kind of just have to take it on the chin when you are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like from a macro perspective, obviously you have to take other things, especially athleticism, into consideration. And that's what like a GM does. But from a scout's perspective, you're doing the purest form of the job, I think, that needs to be done. So
I appreciate it. That's the goal.
No, I really appreciate you coming on. And just to wrap it up, he's Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL. I'm Matt Freese at Fries Football. You can find Nick Olson, who we're going to try to get him around after the draft. No promises. He's a very busy man. He just moved into a new house.
But allegedly is alive.
Yeah, he is still alive. Not in anybody's basement. Unlike other potential Minnesota Vikings podcasts that, Luke might be mortal enemies with. But, we don't have anybody hidden
kidnappings
in any basements here. Yeah, very important. Yeah. At Kindred Skulls on Blue Sky, we're available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also available on YouTube. And with that, Skull Vikings.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.